Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Tech and Learning Leadership Roundtable. These events are part of a series of event offerings by Tech and Learning, and we're really enjoying highlighting the work districts are doing that influence their entire region and keeping the conversations going on social media. Speaking of social media, we are having a live Twitter chat at hashtag TLTechLive. That's hashtag TLTechLive. And we're also glad that you're able to take time out of your busy day to come and join us. And a special thanks to Intel Education for making our time together possible today. You know, as US deaths hit another daily high today, several states and districts are announcing a continuation of distance learning or even reverting back to their remote learning strategies. And the release of the vaccine yields hope on the horizon, but begs the question, what teaching practices have we adopted during these remote or distant settings that would benefit us long term? And one example is the highly effective instructional strategy of flipped learning. And our panelists today are exemplars in this instructional strategy. If you're reflecting on which practices to adopt and sustain, I am in high hopes that flipped learning is on your list. And to tell you more about flipped learning are our panelists, John Bergman, the teacher, author, active learning advocate at Houston Christian High School, Joy McCourt, teacher, secondary at Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate Institute. That's a really long name of a school, Joy. And that's in Toronto District School Board. And Hassan Wilson, who is the assistant head of upper school at Friends Seminary. We want our time together today to be very interactive. So after each of our panelists share their perspective, we're going to be pausing to answer audience questions. So please use the Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom window or the chat feature, that's fine too, to submit your questions along the way. And we'll also have some time for a full panel discussion at the very conclusion of our time together today. Before we get started, we have a couple of poll questions that we want to ask you. So let me get those poll questions up, and here we go. What form of teaching do you use today in our pandemic world? What form of teaching do you use today in our pandemic world? Let's give everyone a few moments to answer that. And let's see what the results are. Okay, 52% are hybrid, 43% remote, and 5%, as we kind of talked about at the beginning, are still face-to-face. Excellent. All right, poll question number 2. Have you, let me wait to get it up. Sorry, technology's not following me today. Have you utilized flipped learning in teaching since the pandemic? Have you utilized flipped learning in teaching since the pandemic? Let's give everybody a few moments. We have a lot of people on our webinar today. We're so thankful that you're here. All right, let's see what those results might be. Okay, not 41% not yet, 43% a little, and 13% it's totally integrated. That's great. 3% are doing a lot. So it looks like we've got the right folks in our webinar today. So thank you again for joining us. Very interesting results, and they seem to be consistent with what we're hearing as we're talking to districts around the country and as we're participating in our leadership roundtables throughout the weeks. Now, to get us started, our first speaker is one of the pioneers of the flipped class movement. He's leading the worldwide adoption of flipped learning by working with governments, schools, corporations, and education nonprofits. And John's the author of 7 books, including the best-selling book, Flip Your Classroom, which has been translated into 10 languages. He spent 24 years as a middle and high school science teacher before becoming the lead technology facilitator for a school district in the Chicago suburbs. And he's a master storyteller, captivates audiences around the globe. He hosts a radio show. He's just an all around good guy and a phenomenal contributor to the field of education. And I'm honored and proud to call him my friend. So, John, before I just keep on bragging about you for the whole webinar, let me turn it over to you.
Well, it's great to be here and have the opportunity to share with everybody about what's going on in the world of education. Flip Learning really is making a huge impact in the world. And I want to start with something sort of pre-pandemic. A couple of stunning facts. Do you realize that all over the world, if you looked all over the world, you'll find, and you looked at classrooms, you'd find that they look amazingly similar, and they look about the same as they did 100 years ago. This is what a classroom, again, pre-pandemic, used to look like 100 years ago, and this is what they looked like about a year ago. And in fact, if you Googled the word, I did this about 2 years ago. I Googled the word classroom. I followed by like a country code. This is what I found. This is what a classroom looks like in the United States, in Taiwan, Japan, Uganda, Afghanistan, Tibet, Egypt, the Middle East, China, India, the Himalayan mountains, Vietnam, Peru, rich countries, developing countries, professional development. You're kind of doing that now, right? The military, and even in prison. But what about now? I said, all right, let me redo this search. I searched the word COVID in school, and I said, what does that look like? This is what it looks like in Taiwan, and in Argentina, at the University of Oklahoma. That looks painful. Pantheon University, France, Japan, the University of Kentucky, the Vatican, South Korea. And that's what it looks like, sort of, but then maybe it looks more like this. Again, more searches, the United Kingdom, just Zoom, right? We're in a Zoom room right now. Stanford Medical School, Furman University, Harvard University, Indonesia, South Korea, the Brookings Institute, New York University, and that's probably your classroom right there, right now, right? So my question is, has things really changed? And what we want to talk about today is, can Flip Learning help you today? A bunch of you said you're hybrid, you're remote. My guess is you're struggling. You know, I'm standing right now in my own classroom and I'm struggling. I am one of the privileged few who sees my kids face to face, although in a socially distanced world, the whole ball game. But I want to talk about what Flip Learning is. You may not really know what Flip Learning is. About 2 years ago, a group of 100 educators from 49 countries got together and really came up with a definitive definition of Flip Learning. I want you to notice the first sentence. It's a framework that enables educators to reach every student. The focus of Flip Learning is to reach every student, and it's by flipping or inverting the traditional class model by presenting concepts before class. And you may not know this, but Flip Learning actually has global standards. They have 12 sectors. So again, that same group of people got together and said, what are the top elements that make Flip Learning work? There's 12 sectors. There's about 100 and some odd best practices. But let me just explain Flip Learning in a quick 3 pictures. You guys all have seen Bloom's taxonomy. And in Bloom's taxonomy, the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy, you spend the vast majority of class time, pre-pandemic, when I teach 19 years as a regular teacher where I lectured, I did that, right? I spent most of my class time on remembering and understanding. And I sent my kids home to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. But what Flip Learning does is it flips Bloom's taxonomy. It allows you to spend more class time. I mean, when I speak class time, it could be a Zoom class time, more class time, if you will, on the hard stuff. And when I wrote one of my books, the book I wrote for ASCD about flipping homework, I really came up with this idea is, what if we take Bloom's taxonomy in a diamond shape? We should spend the vast majority of our time in the middle of Bloom's taxonomy. Now hear me carefully. I'm not saying that students don't need to learn stuff, remembering and understanding. They do that in we like to call the individual space when they're alone, so that when they come face to face, again, face to face could be in a Zoom room, that's where they get the extra help and also the relationship that builds that in. So some context. As the pandemic was just starting, myself and Dan Jones, an amazing flipped educator, came up with this graph. Let me explain this graph. It's got like several axes to pay attention to. Notice that if you go from the bottom to the top, it's Bloom's taxonomy. Remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. And then we've got two colors, red or orange, I guess, orange and blue. The orange is independent space. That's where the students are working alone. And the blue is where the students are working as in a group, the group space. So group space and the independent space. Now, in my classroom, I am teaching face-to-face, very, very blessed that our school somehow managed to stay open-ish, is that I get to spend the bulk of my class time helping kids with the hard stuff. I got a brand new student who checked in this year. I was just talking to her a few minutes ago, and she was trying to figure out how we do class. And I said, well, she tried to do all this hard stuff at home. I said, girl, you're supposed to do that in class because it was really hard. Yeah. And I would have been here to help you. Oh, really? Yeah. So I'm over on the right side of that graph because you see on the bottom axis, you've got asynchronous and synchronous, because I have the blessing of being able to see my students virtually every day. And then I have some kids who are remote because they're quarantining and this kind of thing. So a lot of issues going on there too, but so it's sort of hybrid too. But then I'm able to see my kids and I can do the hard stuff with them in class. But then when for those of you who are remote or hybrid, and you're going to hear from Joy and Hassan who are remote and hybrid, you are further to the left on that graph. You have less and less synchronous time with your students. But notice what happens. If there's less and less synchronous time, you need to provide more support for your students on the hard stuff while they're alone. Because maybe it's this, think of it this way. When the pandemic hit, we realized that the biggest question and the most important thing we have is our connections with our students, our physical time with our students. And the question we've asked in the world of flipped learning for a long, long time is, what's the best use of your face-to-face class time? And I'm going to argue it's not you standing up and then introducing new content. It's them applying and analyzing and evaluating that new content. So yeah, let's now talk briefly about face-to-face. So what does a face-to-face flip class look like? I want you to look picture. I queried a lot of these teachers that I've worked with all over the world and said, what does your class look like? This is what a flip class looks like in Iceland. Again, this is all pre-pandemic, right? This is Istanbul. I skipped it. It's Istanbul, first flipped university in the world. Taiwan, Morocco. This guy's amazing. I've met him. Singapore, Iran. That's right. They're flipping in Iran. All right. I just spent some time with a researcher yesterday from Iran on Zoom. At Harvard Medical School, I was in this class. What an amazing place. They flipped Harvard Medical School. New Zealand, first flipped primary school in all of New Zealand. First flipped school in all of New Zealand. Hong Kong, the United Kingdom, Spain, Australia, China, Argentina, and just around the corner from where I used to live in the Chicago area in Gurnee, Illinois. And I want to sort of end with something that I've been really passionate about in the last bit. And that is the idea of something called mastery learning. I don't know if you realize, but in 1984, Benjamin Bloom, same guy who did the taxonomy, actually started spending the vast majority of his time thinking about this. And he wrote a paper in 1984 called the 2 Sigma Problem. And the 2 Sigma Problem, he encouraged teachers to rethink what education would look like. He basically said, what is going to give you the best bang for your buck in terms of instruction? And so he has this graph. This is directly from that paper that I just cited a minute ago. Conventional education gives you the typical bell-shaped curve. Mastery learning gives you 1 standard deviation improvement. But he says if you can do a 1-to-1 tutorial, then you can get 2 sigma or 2 standard deviation improvement. And in this paper, he's actually said this. I just want to highlight. He says if the 2 Sigma problem yields practical methods that the average teacher can learn in a brief period of time, it would be an educational contribution of the greatest magnitude. And I'm going to be bold enough to say this. I'm going to say bold enough that has this problem been solved? And I think the answer is yes. And the answer is the flipped mastery model. And so in my classroom, my kids do the flipped mastery model. They do direct instruction, that's the DI. They practice, they apply, they assess, and if they don't pass the summative test, they move on. And it just works, guys. It works, it works, it works. I was just working with a young teacher a couple of nights ago, brand new teacher, her first year teaching, and she was just assigned, and she's teaching in a completely remote model. Well, it's kind of remote, and I think it might go back to hybrid. But her issue was she was given the students, maybe this isn't the best idea, whatever, but she was given all the students who really struggle with science. She's a science teacher. And she said, I've got to do mastery. I said, yeah, you do. And so she's going to do mastery learning with these students. And she's really struggling. Now, one thing is a note that really works. It doesn't work unless you have a high level laptop. In other words, she said, I was working at school, but I left my laptop at school or at home, and I went to school and I couldn't do anything. I said, I had this Chromebook, no offense to Chromebooks, but it just wasn't powerful enough. So she needed a robust laptop to make it work. And then I'm going to finish with just a quick video. I'm going to show you a video of what my flipped mastery classroom looks like. And yeah, so let's watch this. So that's my short part of the presentation. I'm going to now turn this over to Keisha to lead a Q&A time.
All right, and we do have some questions, so thank you so much, John. It's super cool to see the evolution of flipped learning from your first, let's say, publication and your first work. I remember sitting next to you at an ISTE author table to today. I mean, and it's so incredible to think about the power of this instructional strategy and instructional method. And we got a couple of questions. One is related to kind of the COVID restrictions, and this teacher, she uses flipped learning, but because of COVID, they have to be 6 feet apart. And she's asking, do you have any suggestions for her or him? I can't really tell by the name about that.
Right. What I'm doing, my kids are less than 6 feet apart. We've just we don't have enough this physical space. So we kind of got a rule of like 1 arm length, and you know, knock on wood, our school has had no transmission of COVID yet. We've had kids get COVID. We've got a couple right now who are out, I think, something like that, who are quarantined because of COVID, but they got it from somewhere else. So, but we're militant about masks. I mean, covering your nose, the whole ball game. So that hasn't really been an issue for us. But there's some digital things during the pandemic. I discovered GoFormative.com, so I can kind of look into everyone's paper at the same time. Allows kids to also write. If you've got like a good computer, like especially like a good PC that's got like a tablet drawing, then you can actually like draw them. Like I teach physics and chemistry, kind of the hard sciences or whatever. Then I can watch them do their problems from a distance, from the front of the room or something like that. So there's ways to do that. Not ideal. It's way better if I can walk around and just look at their paper, obviously. And I've sort of reverted to that this semester because we've had such success, you know, and in terms of keeping the COVID at bay. I mean, we're disinfecting the room and, you know, all kinds of stuff that, you know, to make this a reality.
Right. And, you know, there's some examples of where we use flipped learning in virtual schools. So maybe I can put some of those resources in the chat for our attender in TT2. Okay, here's the next question. I bet you get this all the time. Could flipped classrooms work with the younger children, the primary age children? And
Absolutely.
how young?
I wrote a book on how to flip elementary classrooms, where I interviewed 30 or 40 different flipped elementary teachers. And, you know, the first flipped school in all of New Zealand is a primary school, and they do it with, you know, elementary kids. So yes, it works. Now it often happens the youngest kid, which you do it, and again, pandemic is a little more tricky, but it tends to be an in-class flip. So instead of the videos being something they would watch at home, they're going to do it at a station, kind of a station rotation model in the classroom. And that seems to really work, because the beauty of that is it sort of multiplies you, right? If I've got I worked with a kindergarten teacher, and she was teaching the kids, you know, apple, and but she just recorded that on video, and the kids would watch that, and they would practice, and they would have their, you know, drawing the A, and she'd say, you know, I don't know how there's like go above the line, or I forget how, there's a certain mnemonic that she would use to teach the kids, and she did that with so she kind of made the comments like, I'm multiplied because I can be on the screen and in front of them and all this kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's really a great way to, I call it amplify your reach to teach. Mm-hmm. Hey, what about special ed kids, John? Can it work for our special pops?
So in my school, I teach the lowest level students. I don't have the kids in the advanced classes. I have the lower level kids, even though it's like chemistry. I teach the lower level chemistry classes or whatever. And I have all of the special ed students at our school. And the special ed teachers love the flipped classroom model because I get more attention with their student. I mean, the mantra of flipping is you can reach every student in every class every day. I talk to every kid in every class every day, and I am checking in and working with those students and doing what I can to help them. There's so much more time. If I've got more time to help kids, I can help all kids, special ed students, non-special ed students. Again, this teacher I was talking about earlier, who I was mentoring in the mastery model, she's working with almost all SPED students in her classes, and she's choosing flipped mastery because she realizes, especially, I mean, mastery makes so much more sense in a pandemic world because a lot of kids are coming in with gaps. Like, I mean, again, I've got kids who are coming in second semester, and because they are transferring into the school, they're way behind because at their schools, they didn't get a great experience, the previous school. And so that's okay. So let me get you caught up. So they're just getting caught up. It's working.
Right, that's awesome. And our final question during this little period of time is related to students who you assign that kind of flipped assignment, that at-home assignment, but they don't complete it.
Yeah.
Do you?
And that
Yeah, does that
there's a
stop
long
your
answer to
lesson?
that. No. You just
Okay.
you have to. You can never ever like re-lecture if they don't watch it, because then you're just telling a student who didn't watch it they don't have to, and those who did, they didn't need to either. So there's about 10 different strategies to help you get the students to watch it. You know, and one strategy is going to get a few more kids. I mean, I got a few kids that I'm hassling every day. So I got actually one particular student. If he doesn't watch his video, and I'm just tracking him because he's not getting his work done very often. So if he doesn't, then I get very kind of militant and I call his mom, and that's solving problems. So mom and I are on a first name basis, and we are just, I guess I'm harassing him until he does his work. That's what's working for him. Not every kid needs the harassing. And so it's a matter of, checking their work, making sure it's accountable. There's about 10 different strategies. When added up, usually solves the problem.
Excellent. And I'm sure you'll put in the chat where they could find those resources for those strategies too, maybe. Okay, great. So now let's move. That's great. That's exactly how the next two panelists are going to go, by the way. So go ahead and start thinking about your questions and putting them into chat, or you can use the Q&A if that's easier for you, so that we can have that kind of dynamic dialogue with our next panelist, who is amazing. So now let me introduce to you Joy McCourt. Joy is Ontario certified high school teacher in Toronto with a strong interest in flipped learning. She's actually been flipping lessons since 2013 and has been recognized by the Flipped Learning Global Initiative as one of the FLGI 100, which is the top 100 K-12 teachers leading flipped learning worldwide. So she has a level 2 certification in flipped learning and is also a trainer for level 2. So Joy's going to share what she's been doing in her classroom in Toronto. Let me turn it over to Joy.
Thanks so much, Keisha. And I very much appreciate the invitation to be part of this. If you told me 8 months ago that I was going to be part of a presentation giving strategies for remote and hybrid teaching, I would have laughed and laughed because I found the transition at the time very hard. I'd never taught online before. I'd never been interested in teaching virtual school. And I found working from home, in March with my smallest children around and just handling this way of doing things very difficult to adjust to. So if you're finding that teaching in a fully virtual or hybrid sense, honestly, kind of sucks right now, you're not alone, right? None of this is ideal. So what we can do is look at what some of the issues are that make teaching and learning in these contexts difficult, and what solutions there might be to address some of these points of pain. So some of these are sort of flip specific, and some of them are going to be sort of more broadly applicable. So problem one is that you just are overwhelmed with apps and platforms that are out there. So I don't know in your district, but in mine, as soon as the shutdown happened in March, we got this huge influx of emails from companies and platforms just vying for us to use them in our virtual world. They would offer free trials, or they would reduce the cost, or they would even just say, hey, this is going to be free of charge until the end of the school year. So, we felt out of our element and we wanted to serve our students. So we jumped on and we tried all these platforms, and we ended up just overwhelming ourselves and our students. We had like 25 different websites to visit, apps to install, logins to manage, and it just became dizzying, right? So it came out of a good desire to support our students in the online world, and it became, unfortunately, a bit of a nightmare. So the solution to this is twofold. And the first one is you need to streamline, right? You need to be very intentional about your use of each tool. So you need to have a pedagogically sound reason behind the use of each one. If you heard of the SAMR model, where you have substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition, each of those has a place in teaching, right? So you're going to choose which tool is going to be useful. Are there tools that you can use for multiple purposes in your teaching, in your virtual world? And so leverage what's possible. So I've shown, a particular 3 here, but you might find that a different combination works best for you. And if you find that other teachers are also using the same tools, then so much the better, so that students, again, are not overwhelmed, and teachers can support each other. Another good strategy to use to support students and yourself, honestly, in this whole idea of being overwhelmed, is to have a consistent place for students to check what's required of them each day. So this is especially important in a hybrid context with cohorts, as we have in my world, where I might have one group of students face-to-face, while another group of students is supposed to be doing asynchronous work, perhaps badly titled, on their own at home, and I cannot answer their questions because I'm busy interfacing with my face-to-face students, and they're supposed to be doing independent work. So the students at home, they need to have a consistent place to go to say, what am I supposed to be doing right now? So in the spring, I just used a slide deck that I continuously updated. I wanted to have things in forward chronological order. And the way that we worked in the spring as well, students might be at different points at different times. So if I found that a student was falling behind, I could say, hey, you need to make sure you do the work that's shown on slide 2 and slide 5. And that was their way of catching up. So for example, I would link a spreadsheet that showed the expectations for the week and the agenda for the week. I would link the lesson videos for the day because I was doing a flipped approach. And then the practice work and answers to the practice work that were based on that. I did still use our learning management system, our LMS, to do certain assignments, but I always made sure that in this Launchpad, this slide deck, I said, here's what you need to make sure that you have checked, and here's what you need to make sure that you have actually done in that LMS. So it was something that was consistent. So mine was mainly text-based in the spring. But there are these things called hyperdocs out there that have been put together by teachers with much better graphic design skills than I have. And there are many examples of these out there. Some of them are on the HyperDocs website itself. But if you look, there are several out there that have been developed by various teachers, where it might actually step the students through a particular unit of instruction or a particular lesson, linking in, like actually embedding the videos right within the deck and embedding space for the students to answer their questions and be linked out to different interactive activities. So do check what's out there before you reinvent the wheel. We are working hard enough. So take advantage of what teachers have done and shared out of the goodness of their hearts. Of course, if your school already has a learning management system that is used school-wide, that is a fantastic place to use as a launchpad, because the students are probably familiar with it already, and they may be using it for their other class or their other classes as well. So there are 2 particular LMSs that we're supposed to be using in the Toronto District School Board. So we may find that our students are taking 2 classes at a time right now. So we may find that a student is taking 1 class with 1 LMS and 1 class with another LMS, but they are overall familiar with both. And you have to be, when you're making the choice between LMS systems, if you have that choice, then you look to see, formatting options and things like that. So that is the first problem that I found that I needed to address, is just, what am I going to use with my students, right? But another big problem right now in COVID land is students feeling isolated due to, the distancing that we have to do, the masking, the protective measures. Even in a hybrid context, this is a problem. I do see my students once every 4 classes, although right now we're in another emergency shutdown. So, but I was seeing my 1 class on day 1, and then 3 class days would pass, and I'd see them again face-to-face on day 1. And so they are seeing each other, But at the same time, they are sitting at their individual desks, 6 feet from each other with a mask on. You know, you can't see facial expression so well. And when they are at home, they are at home more than they're at school in a lot of models. And because we're all kind of feeling honestly a little bit down because of the world in which we're living right now, not a lot of people have the resilience to reach out and say, hey, how are you doing? How can I help you? And so it can get easy to get into a feeling like nobody cares. All right. So one solution to this is you need to build care and community into your class. And so as far as the care piece, I try to use a check-in form regularly. I get this idea from another teacher, Andrew Swan. And just sending out this form, yes, I see my hybrid students face to face, but because of the distancing, they might not feel as able to open up as they could, you know, back before we had these distancing measures. And plus being able to open up in a form gives them the time to really think through their thoughts and think through what they're comfortable sharing. So I usually give them a simple rating scale, you know, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, 1 to 10 of how they're doing overall. And I make that question required. And then I give a follow-up question, giving them the option to explain why they give themselves the rating that they did. And there might be some more specific questions about, you know, the particular activities I'm doing with them and how things are working out for them and so on. But I find that this helps me to get a good pulse of how the class is doing as a whole. And then, so for example, if a student says I'm at a 2 out of 10 and I'm doing really poorly, I connect with their vice principal, their guidance counselor and whatnot. And that has been helpful. You know, and where a student would replied and said, I got COVID and my mom had COVID and I'm having a hard time keeping up. That's very useful information for me. Another piece that I do is building community through this gamification platform called Classcraft. Now, there's different ways to gamify your class. I love Classcraft because it's team-based. It's not just students competing against each other, but they are in teams that are working as a team together to succeed or fail as a group. So there's 3 roles in Classcraft. There's the mage, the guardian, and the healer, and they each have different powers that can help each other. And so I break my class as a whole into groups of 4 to 6 students. And this semester, I've intentionally mixed up my fully virtual and my hybrid students so that I have a mix of each on each team. And I could throw them into a breakout room as a team and say, hey, you're going to work on this, you're going to work on this, and then we're going to come back and have a team challenge. So that's fantastic. There are free versions and premium versions of Classcraft. So you can actually choose to do this without paying a cent. So it's a fantastic platform. Classcraft also has certain random events which give consequences or rewards to teams, and just for something random, like it says, oh, hey, your team got attacked by a dragon, and so everybody loses some health. Or hey, you took a rest and you found some special mushrooms and they made you feel good, so everybody gets, you know, a health point bonus. So I run those at attendance time just to add an element of fun, because honestly, things are kind of dreary right now. And I'm a huge geek and I love gaming. So I find that that helps my classes, right? So I find that that adds some more enjoyment and community to the class. Another frustration that comes up for teachers and students alike is low quality videos. So if you're creating those yourself, or low quality video conferences, right? So dealing with lag, dealing with poor audio quality, dealing with poor video quality, dropped connections, like this is frustrating for everybody, right? So if you're trying to run your Google Meet or your Zoom conference and you're getting kicked out of your own class, that's a problem. Right. And so how can we approach making the technical side of it as foolproof as possible? So, I mean, you can probably see this coming, that the solution is to make sure that you're optimizing your system. So if we can go to the next slide. Oh, back, yeah, there we go. So for example, right now I'm wearing earbuds and I'm using an external microphone, right? So when I'm teaching, I usually use a headset instead. But I find that having an external microphone, you want to make sure it's good quality. It picks up my voice a lot better than the microphone built into my laptop. Also, I find that I need to use earbuds or a headset so that as you're hearing sound, that's not getting picked up by the microphone and causing feedback, which is a huge problem. You know, if you're in a room with somebody that's not using earbuds, you can tell because you get an echo of what's going on, right? Also, if you're producing notes with your students, I am a math and chemistry physics teacher. I do a lot of worked examples with my class. And so I had to decide, am I going to use a document camera with paper, or I'm going to use a pen tablet, as some of my colleagues do. So I personally prefer a document camera and paper. I don't use a whole lot of PowerPoint, right? I'm usually generating notes on the fly with my students and working through the examples. And I find that that is more helpful to me. And of course, at the core of all this, as John said, you need to make sure that you have a computer that can handle the demand that you're putting on the system, right? So as I'm trying to support all of these external devices, I need to make sure I can connect them up and that they can run the software that's necessary. As we're doing video conferences, it needs to be robust enough. It needs to be fast enough to connect to the outside world, and then through that to the digital world of my students quickly, so that I can update things as soon as possible and they can access them without worrying about lag and getting frustrated. So this has been very important to me to have. I've actually had to upgrade, the various things that I've been using with my system. So I had an old document camera that I got back in 2013 when I first started flipping. It wasn't good enough. And so I have to use a better document camera, and I upgraded in that sense. And that came with upgrading the software, and that made sure, like, can my laptop handle this? So those are just a few of the frustrations and solutions we can consider, but I hope that looking at those three as a start is helpful.
All right, thank you so much. I have questions, and I see some that have come in from our audience. So that was, I saw a lot of yes, because a lot of people feel the same way that you do about those challenges, and they were really happy to see your solutions. And some people actually have different solutions that they put in the chat. So if you're attending, be sure and check out the chat too. So here is one question for you, my friend. A district that's participating blocks YouTube. John offered some suggestions in chat, but do you have any recommendations for if the district that you're working in blocks YouTube? What are your alternatives?
Well, one platform that I use for videos is Edpuzzle. So I'd say, first of all, see if, because when they're accessing an Edpuzzle video, first of all, Edpuzzle will tell you who has watched the video and how much of the video they've watched. And it also breaks it into 10 segments. And they say, hey, this person watched this part 4 times. So that's great information for you to know. So first of all, check to see if that will work. You can also download the video yourself. Now, again, I'm usually producing my own videos. So I tend to, if I'm not producing it to YouTube, I will take it and actually embed it within the learning management system. And so the students will access the video through the learning management system. So they don't necessarily have to go to an external link. So you could do it that way as well.
All right, that's excellent. I just was taking notes myself. And what suggestions you had? You talked about video. Video is a key component for Flipped. John, of course, is video guru, dude. But how do you get started with that? I've heard a lot of teachers say, and some have even commented in our chat, that can be overwhelming for some teachers.
Yep.
Just the thought of producing a video. So
right.
How do you get started? What do you do?
There's various platforms out there. I actually went to the Flip Tech conference that happened this past summer with somebody. It was just starting at the basics of video production, and all she was doing was using QuickTime. And so she used the screen recording function of QuickTime with a built-in webcam in her laptop, and just using that to capture video as she narrated over her PowerPoint or as she drew using a pen tablet. So QuickTime is an option that actually does have recording built straight into it. It's not just for playing video. Another good platform is, there's two actually that I've used. Screencastify is one to look up. Actually, somebody just put that into chat. Fantastic. Screencastify is out there. And also Screencast-O-Matic, where it's screencast-O-Matic. will record, yeah, there we go, that they will record video for you that you can then share the link with your students. Now there are premium and free ways of accessing these. Loom is another version. I'm losing track of the chat.
So catalog going now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been such an like when I started in 2013, I got this thing called Camtasia, and it was expensive. And I love Camtasia because I started with it in 2013, but there's no way that that would be my first go-to. It's very powerful. But compared to if you just need something basic to start with, starting with something like Screencastify is a very good option.
Good option. Very good. And John was right to note that video isn't the lead in flipped learning, but it is a component, or can be a component. And it's a component that a lot of people have kind of a fear factor for. So here's another one. What's a good platform to deliver slides or forms?
Slides or forms? Well, I mean, I live in, my district happens to be a G Suite district. And so that is the way that I have gone. Again, your LMS, you should explore what's available there. So yes, because we're a G Suite, we do embed into Google Classroom, and that's how I personally have run. But perhaps those in the chat can contribute what's worked in your district if you're not a Google district. So for example, I've heard of Microsoft Teams being very useful for just having chat between students. So I'm not as familiar with how it does at file sharing and whatnot. So Brightspace, yes, we use Brightspace in my district as well. That's the alternative that we have. So all of our classes in the TDSB are supposed to use either Google Classroom or Brightspace. And Brightspace can be very powerful once you learn how to, there is a bit of a learning curve to setting up your quizzes and whatnot. Yeah.
And I will say for Microsoft, they have OneDrive that's like like a Google Drive. They have it mirrors Google. So if you have Office 365, you actually have everything and more that Google has to offer. So you mentioned, and John mentioned it, and I'm just going to go ahead and put a Q in, the computer speed. And you really are dependent on having a robust computer, or one that at least has a phenomenal processor. So I'm not going to put that question on you. I'm going to put that on John. I'm teeing him up for a little bit later, but I appreciate you mentioning that, because that really is important. And some of the frustration comes when your technology isn't as robust as you need it to be to do the work. So thank you so much, and outstanding questions from our audience. Our audience is doing really good at posting their questions. I really appreciate it. And now it's time for our final panelist, Hassan Wilson. And he is the assistant head of upper schools at Friends Seminary. And after a long tenure, and it's a science department head. Science is my background too, Hassan. For the last 3 years, he's also been at Friends Seminary liaison with a hybrid learning consortia, a role in which he supports students in their online classes. And he's going to share his experiences and kind of put perspective in the benefits of blended learning. So let me turn it over to Hassan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've been flipping just like Joy since around 2013. And as John said earlier, I think flipped learning is more than just using videos or whatever medium to deliver content and spending class time on some of the higher blooms. I think it's a mindset. It's a framework, a way of thinking. And when we went to remote learning in March, and it became clear that we were not going to return for the rest of the school year, I used spring break I just sort of went into my flipped learning mode and made some changes to my class. It was a hard transition, but I have to say that having done flipped learning for many years, I think I had an advantage to deal with the remote setting. Currently, I am fully remote, even though in the second semester, we're going to do more of the hybrid model. So I have a series of tips. I have 10 tips actually that I'm going to share. And I remember when I first started learning about flip learning, 7 or so, 8 years ago, I remember the veterans, like John Bergman, that flip learning is more than just about videos. And I remember thinking, well, I'm not even making videos yet. So I'd like to get some insight about videos. So I thought that I would take an approach today to kind of do some of the entry point stuff about flip learning. So I wanted to give you some tangible tips for flip learning in the remote, hybrid, or even in-person setting. And the first tip has to do with leveraging the right tools. And so since I'm remote, I can use, I have videos that I teach content, but I also have twice a week, I have Zoom sessions, my live sessions with my students. And it became clear that when you're, just like as John said, what's the best use of your face-to-face time? I knew I had to use my Zoom sessions for the interactions. Anything, the most interactive portions of my class, I want to offload that onto Zoom. And any of the sort of low level direct instruction, here are some facts you need to know, here's some instructions you need to know, I put that on video. You can watch it at your own leisure, you can rewind and fast forward, you can watch it multiple times, but the Zoom sessions or the video conferencing sections need to be where you do most of the interactive portions. So I definitely would say that's probably the most important tip with remote learning. And then tip 2, I would consider using video for many different purposes. So we're probably familiar with, teaching a concept. I think that's where flip learning sort of got, became to the forefront of our minds, is using the video, these short videos to teach concepts. But I also use it to introduce a unit or a week. So say, this is what's going to happen this week. Here are the things I need you to do. Or demonstrate how to use a tool or a website. So if there's like an online simulation or a website that I need students to access, I'll do a screen recording video and talk through that, narrate that. Or if there's some hands-on activities that I want students to do at home, so maybe it's a lab or something to that effect, I will create a video. I call those labcasts, the videos to show, this is how I want you to do the activity. So you have to hold something in a certain way, use a certain tool. I would definitely say tip 2, use video for a variety of purposes. For tip number 3, one thing that's you might not predict, but when you have your classes face to face and in person, you really have the luxury of stopping your class and pointing things out to your students. And if your instructions are not as clear, you can grab the class and say, oh, this is how I want you to do it. You can demonstrate it. But when you're in a remote setting, you really don't have that luxury. So you have to be really mindful of your instructions, about how to front load your instructions. And I would say flip videos is a great way to do that. So I would supplement my written instructions and maybe images with a video. So I can't stress enough the importance of these videos that can be served as instructions. And for tip 4, another type of video that I use is at the beginning of each unit or each week, I give a video overview. I have a written out to-do list that has all the deadlines, and I even color coded, here, I want you to do this, here's the deadlines, and that's all in a nice list that everyone can see on a learning management system. But there's also a video. The benefit of the video is, one, obviously you can demonstrate things, but it's also, if you're teaching remotely, it's just another way for your kids to interact with you, or to see you, to see your face, to hear your voice. So if you only have your live sessions once or twice a week, this is another way that the kids are hearing your voice, seeing your face. And I try to do videos that are not just in my office at my home, but maybe it's walking around in my neighborhood. Maybe it's a park or something. And that's a way to, maybe it's, when you're doing some kind of activity that you really like doing, you can pause and they can see, oh, you really like riding your bike. And then you go on and you talk about what you have planned for the week. So it's just another way to personalize your class, to get students to connect with you. And I think connection when you're teaching remote is really important. I think that maximizes the chance that students are going to interact with your content. On to tip 5, in the next few tips, I want to talk about support. And I love John's image where he showed the level of support, the amount of support, that if you're asynchronous, if you're spending a lot of time asynchronously, you have to give more support. And I definitely agree with that. And in flipped learning, I think that's a similar thing that, when you don't just send your kids off to, here, watch a video and you're gonna all of a sudden understand and learn. You have to understand that students, when they're watching videos or watching movies, that's a different mindset. That's a really passive kind of sit back, eat popcorn and watch the screen, and you're just a passive consumer. But in flipped learning, when you're expecting students to learn content and learn ideas and skills from your videos, you really do have to get them in a different mindset, that they really are active participants. They're not passive consumers of the video. And so a few things that I do when I start my course is I have different types of support strategies. So for example, with my videos, I create note template sheets, which is sort of like part of the notes are filled in, part of the notes are not filled in, maybe there's some diagrams. And the idea is that you're pointing out to students, hey, this is the important things I want you to take away from this video. And so they have to complete that note template sheet in order to take notes. And you could also scaffold it. That can be a way of scaffolding. So when you get towards the, maybe in the second quarter or third quarter, maybe you're removing more things from your note sheet. And maybe at some point you're taking away the template sheet so that students are, sort of building those skills, and then they take more ownership of their notes. So that's definitely a support task that I would include. Tip 6 is really about the sort of interaction with the video. Again, not only do you want them to take notes, but you want them to not just sort of passively take notes, but you also want them to engage and think about the content. So I remember when I first started flipping, I would embed questions into my video. I would actually, in my video, I would say, okay, I want everyone to pause and I want you to think about this question. Once you've thought about this question, I want you to unpause, and then I will talk them through it. And that's definitely something you can do. There are different types of software that allow you to actually embed the questions into your videos. So there's things like Edpuzzle where you grab your URL or your embed code from YouTube or somewhere, wherever you're hosting your video, put it onto Edpuzzle, and then you can put in different types of questions, and then the video will actually pause. So you see this screenshot here is showing this video about Ebola, and then adding a question, and the video pauses. They can't move forward until they answer the questions. And then you as the teacher, you get access to the diagnostics. So you get to see which questions are students struggling with. And they don't all have to be multiple choice. You can have some, short response questions that you can look at before next class, and you have a sense from one, who's watched the videos, and two, what ideas are students struggling with, and that you can incorporate into your next lesson. So I definitely would say, have some kind of questions, some checks for understanding. It could be during the video. I remember also when I first started, I had a Google form or some kind of form that would ask questions after the video. But there are a lot of different ways you can do that. So definitely have some checks for understanding during the video. Related is, again, more supporting tasks. I remember when I first started flipping, some of my students and some of their family members or parents were really anxious about this idea of flipping. This was a time I was doing a traditional flip in which I was sending kids home with the video, and then we have labs and discussions in class. And one aspect that I think people were nervous about was, well, if students have a question or they're confused during the video, how can they get their questions asked? Answered, excuse me. And so I started actually on the learning management system. I would have a discussion thread for each video. And so as students are engaging with the videos or after the videos, I required them to ask a question, whether it was a clarifying question or a question that was sort of like a bigger question, like, that show interest about the content in the video. And I would encourage my students to also answer questions of their classmates. And again, this was a way for students to engage with the video, as well as for you to gauge what your students are confused about. So I was really paying attention to those discussion threads between classes so I can see what students are talking about in terms of the video. So that's definitely a support task that I would recommend. Number 8, feedback. Get feedback about your videos. I know when I started making videos, I was really anxious about getting feedback. I was so nervous. I was thinking like, well, I'm a teacher. I'm not, I'm not Steven Spielberg. Like I'm not some fancy director or producer or something. And I was nervous about getting the feedback. I thought that, my students would hate my videos, and I couldn't even watch my videos at first because I hated my voice. I didn't like the way I looked on the screen, but after a while you get over that. But I would say definitely get feedback. So I do some kind of form at the end of each video and have my students rate the video, like, how it helped them learn. I also have an ebook that I authored. So students get to choose between watching a video or reading the chapter that I wrote. And then they get to rate it, and then they explain their ranking of the video or the text. And what that does is that even though I'm unlikely to even look at it during the school year, it allows me to, during the summer, prioritize, okay, which videos do I need to edit? Where do I need to fix things? And so I start looking at the average ratings, and it allows me to figure out prioritize which videos am I going to work on. Tip 9, I'm making sort of transition somewhere else other than the supporting task, is when you're teaching remote, you want to make sure that you're having students, at least I would strongly advise, have students do some hands-on learning. I think when students are remote, a lot of their work is on the screen. They get screen fatigue. Their class is on the screen. The work that they have to do is on the screen. And so as much as possible, if you can get them doing some things, even sometimes requiring them, hey, this assignment you have to write on paper and you have to take a picture of it and upload it. You have to draw something, you have to build something, because when they're at home, it's just easy for them to be on the screen all day. And I don't think that's, even though we can't avoid it because of what's happening today, we want to encourage hands-on learning. And so what I do is I have my students document their learning from by creating a video. So now I'm talking about the students making the video. So I really love to have students demonstrate what they learned by making a video, showing evidence of completing a lab or activity by creating a video. And that, again, gets students more engaged. And then for my final tip, of course, is if you're creating videos, if your students are creating videos, you have to have the hardware to be able to do it. I know there's some people who are using, and I won't say names of equipment, but I will say that there's some equipment that's better than others, that are stronger, faster. And I really think that you can't do this work without the right hardware, without the right laptops. When I when I was first thinking about flipping, I sent an email to my head of school and I said, hey, look, I really want to try this technique. I think and I sort of outlined the reasons why it would be beneficial. And then after that email, within, I think 5 or 10 minutes, I got an email from the director of technology saying, what do you need? And I've been making videos and flipping ever since. And I couldn't have done it without the support of my administration. So those are my 10 tips. And I'm happy, I have a lot of tips, but my 10 tips about videos and using videos and flip learning. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Oh my goodness. That's good because there's a couple of set of questions in and we are at time, but we're going to go over a little bit if everybody can hang with us to answer these questions. And then we're going to finish up with John answering that teed up question that I gave him a minute ago. So Hassan, here are your questions. Is it okay to work on a collaborative document during a synchronous Zoom session? Is it okay to work on a collaborative document during a synchronous?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, definitely. Yes, yes, yes. I mean, that's a great way to get collaboration, to get students working together. You can see what's happening in real time, so you can give feedback. You could use the online slides and documents. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Awesome. Excellent. I think some people do get nervous about breakout rooms and giving activities. So that's great for you to kind of bless that for them. And then is it really helpful to model how to take notes from a video in class?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the early activities that you do in the school year, where you put on a video, you play it, you have your template sheet, you show what to write. You might say, oh, what should we write here? Let's pause the video. Yeah, so I think that's a great technique. But I would say that more and more students are getting experience with flip learning, and I'm finding that students now, as opposed to 2013, are more able to get those notes.
Yeah, they're a lot more familiar with the tech tools that you're using. And those were amazing tips. I'm especially fond of the video conferencing tip, by the way. Now let's bring everyone back on. And I want John to tie up some loose ends and just very briefly make the connection between like face-to-face and completely online, and then answer that teed up question that I gave around what do you really need to look for in a computer system when you're doing this kind of work? We don't want anybody to leave here and think that, they can do it on a mobile device, because that might not be possible. So I'm gonna let you take that.
Well, first of all, I want to just thank everybody for bearing with. I know it's a long day and you guys are busy and you're exhausted teachers like all of us. And so I know that, and I know that when I went to remote, there was a day I threw up my arms and I just wanted to scream. And I thought it should be easy for me because, I've been flipping since 2007 and it wasn't. So this is hard. And I want to just say, educators out there, you are doing an amazing job out there, and I know it's hard. But I also know that flipped learning can make it better, and it's made my classes better. You've heard it from Hassan and Joy, and there's thousands upon thousands of teachers. I mean, if there's any indicator that flipped learning is working, is that every flipped educator I've talked to, and I've talked to many, hundreds, since the pandemic has happened, has been tapped to help their staff with flipped learning. Because everybody needs flip learning. And there was a tweet by another one of the sort of top flippers from way back. He said, flipped learning teachers have been preparing for the pandemic for the past 10 years. And Hassan, you're shaking your head. And we just started early, and now it's job. We have to have these skills that we have, but that doesn't make it easy though. And in terms of laptops and robust things, I have a story similar to Hassan's. When we first started flipping, we were burning our videos onto DVDs because our kids didn't have internet access at home, and we had a 1X DVD burner on this old iMac. And then I went to the director of technology and said, it's killing us. And they showed up with this IBM Intel computer that had an 8X DVD burner, and it changed 3 hours per DVD burning time to 7 minutes. And you don't necessarily need to do that now, but it was so important for us to have a decent computer. I mean, a computer with a real processing speed, something that, you know, when I render videos, even I have a fast computer with 16 gigabytes of RAM and I got all that stuff, and it takes a long time to render videos. And if I was doing it on a slow machine, it wouldn't work. Now that's when I'm creating my own videos. And so, I mean, we've all said this is, you know, the Department of Education is changing. I'm going to be sort of political for a moment, and maybe that's, and there is a need to purchase high quality devices for teachers so that we can do the kinds of things we need to do. And I'm hoping that there will be some funding there. I'm not a politician and don't pretend to be one, but I really think that there needs to be some oomph so that we have devices and the training also to use these devices. A lot of teachers I know are struggling with, how do I make a video? A lot of the questions in the chat were how that, Hassan, you gave us great tips, but it requires money and someone has to spend it. So
We're going to get it. I know we are. I know we are. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you guys kind of leading the way for a lot of teachers today and doing that heavy lift of figuring out all these tools and these strategies, these processes, so that all of the teachers around the world today can lean into your work and follow your lead in doing their work today. And, you know, I hope that we don't return to the way it was before the pandemic. I hope we continue to embrace the things that we've adopted, the technologies that we've adopted, and just make it better for everybody. So thank you so much to our panelists for being with us today. Thanks so much to Intel Education for making our time together possible. Thank you to our audience who took the time out of their schedules to log in and spend this time together to participate in that amazing chat, and I still see it just blowing up, and that's so amazing. I thoroughly enjoy my time with you during our virtual leadership roundtables and my partnership with Tech and Learning. We have a lot of ideas about supporting districts and schools as we move forward, and so please check back on the Tech and Learning website and the K20 Connect website for more information about future opportunities to come together as an education community. It's always a pleasure to spend time with our amazing education professionals around the world, and I'm forever grateful for you being part of our time today. I look forward to seeing you at our next Intel Series webinar, as well as other future Tech and Learning webinars. We're thankful progress is being made on the vaccine so that we will soon be together in person without masks. And until then, keep believing in the power of education. It's going to change the world. It really is. We just have to fund it, like John said. Be well, everybody.